Hey guys, welcome to another podcast by Constitution Insider. This is kind of a filler podcast because in the previous podcast, which was the fundamental rights extended discussions, I forgot to mention one of the very uh, you know uh, rare case where a fundamental right for that matter, was curtailed. So this I felt needed a different episode, so here you are, and the title is right to property, but actually that is not a right. Okay, so let me give some background on this. Well, when the first constitution was enacted in January 26, 1950, and from where later on the laws of the nation became legal as per the constitution, the right to property was valid under Articles 19 and Article 31. Okay, and Article 19 guaranteed to all citizens the right to acquire, hold and dispose of property. Article 31 provided that no person shall be deprived of his property save by the authority of law. And even also it provided that compensation should be paid if a person has lost his property or his property has been taken for public purposes. Well, this right was, and provisions relating to this rights were changed a number of times. The most important was the 44th Amendment of 1978, which deleted the right of properties from the list of fundamental rights. So, in respect to that, meaning that right to property is no longer a fundamental right, meaning it is not the basic right, meaning it should not be a right. It is a right, but it should not be. It's not that it should not be, but it is not a major concern. If you do not have property, it doesn't matter, because the constitution, the amendment one at least, says that it's not your fundamental right. It is your right, but it's not such a basic one so as to require remedying. So instead of that, some provisions which under Article 300A were added to the constitution, which said that no person shall be deprived of his property save by the authority of the law. So that is where the phrase came. So if the government intends to take away property from a person, then he does not have the right to go to court against it. Only if it was taken away illegally, that is, if it was taken illegally, of course he can go to court. But if the government says, we want this for developmental purposes, for public purposes, and we want to acquire your land, the person cannot do anything to stop them. So it is still a constitutional right. There is a right in the constitution which says that you are entitled to hold a property, or entitled to buy property, share property, sell property and all that, but it's no longer a fundamental right. It's no longer a right which concerns a human being. It's more like concerns a society, or a country, where it should, like, the needs of the country are higher than that of a person. It's one of those cases. So once again there is right to remedy. If the government has acted unfairly, then the action can be challenged in the court by a aggrieved citizen. Okay, so when the Indian economy opened up in the 1990s through let me try to pronounce this word, liberalization. There you go, we got it. So a lot of special economic zones were set up so that industries can prosper, but these zones were on area which were acquired land from people or farmers, to be more, and this have led to people asking for the right to property be reinstated as a fundamental right. The Supreme Court had talked to the government about all this, and they have rejected any plea on the fact that whether this should be made a fundamental right. So currently it is not a fundamental right, but it is a constitutional right. So some rights define a human being, but others are just there to help society to function in a better way. So, and the right to property is one of them. So though it is no longer a fundamental right, it is an important right. The very fact that we have houses means that we have access to that right. It is not like this land, your land is not the government's land, and it was not the government which has leased the land to you. You are the sole owner of that land. You have control over whatever you do in that land. And also, but it only puts a limit on your power just to a fact that if in the case of national development your land is required, you cannot stop the government from acquiring it, and that is all. Okay, I would like to extend my talk in this episode to right to education, which was one of the most recent fundamental rights which was added in 2002 under the 86th Amendment Act of 2002. So though it was enacted in 2002, it was brought into implementation 8 years later. Article 21A so made this a fundamental right and brought this into force. So what does this right do? It makes elementary education an entitlement for children in the 6 to 14 age group. So this means that all students or all children from the age 6 to 14 must be able to attend school, and also it also provides provisions by which teachers can be appointed to enable the teaching of such an age group. Okay, so here there is a bit controversy. They talk about reservation. At least 25% of the seats in any educational institute should be reserved for the weaker section of the society. Many people are just against reservation for any of those matters. So there will be controversy here and there, but overall it's a good step. Educating people is always a good step. Giving knowledge to people is always a good step. So just like this podcast, I talk a lot on these issues, and this is educating many people who might not have known about this. So this is very much in accordance with right to education kind of thing. This is an extension of that. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed all these videos so far. Hopefully you guys will like the videos. Do share the videos with many people, that more people get access to this type of discussions, knowledge also. So it's very much important that many people access this. Many people get to know our constitution, because sadly the current generation hardly know what our constitution entitles us, what are our duties, what are our rights, how we are to serve the nation, how we are to serve the constitution. So this is just an attempt in that direction. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. I would like to conclude with my motto: never stop learning, never stop exploring. Thank you.